Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Here today we are going to work on this really unique scene. It's on an 8 by 10 inch canvas. Here we have our reference photo and we have a lot of great colors in. There are some oranges, blues, greens, browns. It's quite saturated and I think a really lovely spring summer scene. It's also worth noting I do have a lot of my colors out. These aren't all of the colors. We'll interject new ones as we go, but I'm really looking forward to this. It is the first lesson in the brand new home, the brand new space, and what you will notice here is that there's no longer construction sounds, which I think is probably the best part. So with that, we are going to have a nice relaxed painting session. I'm really looking forward to this one. It's the first painting in the new space. I feel like those are always special. And we are going to begin, as we typically do, with the 1-inch flat-headed brush. So I'm going to begin by just adding a little bit of water to the brush. That'll help keep the paint wet longer. We will start right down here in the sunset. And you can see that when I zoom in, we have some orange towards the bottom. It's still an orangey blue towards the top, but let's begin by taking that titanium white, a little bit of our cad orange. We'll probably grab a hint of our oxide black to desaturate it, just a hint, but you can see I'm also taking the majority of the excess off the brush there. We'll work this down, and I think that's actually a great start. Now the beauty of the larger flat-headed brush, it can create these large sharp markings, but in addition, you can just apply so much paint so quickly. So good start there. We can also see that there's a little bit out here. I'll probably paint the rest of the sky at a slightly different point, but for now we'll just get it started. And then as we move upwards, we can see that it actually gets a bit more gray. So we start interjecting more of our titanium white, brighten that up a bit. We'll apply that right on top, leaving a little bit of space for our sun, creating these nice gradients, and then we'll just softly blend our first application into our new one. And when I'm blending, I try to apply as little pressure as I possibly can. The more pressure you add, the more streaky it'll get. So we're just going to be mindful of that. We can interject a little bit of yellow into this, a little bit more titanium white as we build upwards. And you can see we're just making slight changes in our sunset with every application. The goal isn't to do anything too dramatic. We're not applying a lot of paint. Being very mindful with our applications. And just like that, we go back to the palette, we grab more of the titanium white, and we just continue to build this up. That said, it's been, I think, 2 weeks. The move took quite some time, but we are fairly settled in, just a couple of boxes left, and I got really excited about filming another lesson. So happy to be back, grateful to be here. Thank you for tuning back in, joining me for this creative experience. And I hope you like the new camera right here. Trying something new with it, just trying to make it a little more personal. But this is a good start. We do want to begin transitioning this into a little bit more of a gray. So we'll grab a hint of our oxide black, more of our titanium white, and this is actually perfect. It's a warmer, bright gray. Wonderful transitionary pigment. We'll just do a little bit there. Maybe we do a little bit towards the top here. Take off the excess because, again, we don't want a lot. We can even grab some of the previously applied yellow to create that transition. And I'm going to be mindful of my hand. I haven't painted with this layout too many times, and I really don't want to put my hand in front of the camera. So I will be mindful, but I also apologize if once in a while I do mess up here and there. So we'll just apply a little bit of that gray there. The gray is really important because it's going to bridge the oranges and the blues that we have. If we didn't have it in between, we'd probably get a lot of green, and we don't really want that for our sunset. So now as we continue upwards, you can see that there are slight interjections of blue, but I think I'm actually going to go about this in a slightly different way. I'm going to grab a lot of our ultramarine blue, a bit of our oxide black, about an equal amount of our titanium white. We're going to mix up a decently saturated, decently bright blue up here at the top. That's pretty lovely. I think we can double down on the titanium white though. I'm a big believer in continuing to mix the pigment until you get what you actually want. I know often we can get a little impatient, get excited about putting paint on the canvas, but if you take that extra time to do a bit more mixing, often at the end of the painting journey, you'll be a lot happier. So once we have this, I'm just going to throw it on the top of the canvas, like so. And we have quite a bit of pigment. So I'm going to try to go over it again with very soft markings, like so. My goal is to do this while this is still a little bit wet. It'll make the transition portion a lot easier, the blend a lot easier. Now I think we go in with a lot of titanium white into that mix, really brighten it up. It'll also desaturate it a bit, which is nice because it makes it more of a transitionary pigment for the gray we mixed up and applied to the bottom of the sunset. So we'll apply this, we'll build it up into that blue, that way we have a nice gradient. And that really is one of the biggest benefits of these sunsets, right? It's being able to craft these wonderful gradients. And every time I go back in and I move down, I interject more titanium white into the mix. And maybe we just switch hands for a second. If you're ambidextrous, this is a lot easier. But you also probably don't have to, because you're not worried about covering up a camera as you paint. And here I'm just going to soften a little bit of it by going over it many times with as little pressure as possible. At this point, I've pretty much accepted that this will be a little bit dry by the time we get to it. That's okay. We'll just do a little bit of a wet and dry mix, which is also important to know. So, you know, maybe it was meant to be. Maybe we weren't meant to get to it for the sake of showing that technique off a little bit more. Or we just redo the bottom and blend it up towards the top. That said, we are going for more of a titanium white heavy mix in this transitionary space. So we yet again remix that, work it up into the blues. There we go. It's also worth noting we will have some branches and some foliage up here, so if it's not perfect, that's also okay, because we will be able to cover up areas we don't love. There we go. Now I'm going to make sure my brush is pretty clean. Maybe we grab a little bit of that pre-existing grayish orange. We work that right down here. Get a nice soft blend between the two. Keep that natural. Ooh, that looks good. We can go back to the oranges that we had before. Work that towards the bottom. Bring those back up. And you don't have to paint the side of the canvas, but you can as well. So at this point, I think it's a pretty good start. It's a little streaky, but again, I'm not too concerned about that at this point. It's also worth noting that if you don't have a thick application, I'd recommend just going over all of your paints one more time. So let it dry and then go back in. That can give you an opportunity to take out streaks. It can also give you an opportunity just to have a nice thick base for your pigments and your applications. So far, so good. We are going to mix up a little bit more of the original orange mix to bring it up there. And I know we're taking a while to paint a gradient, but this is one of those things where if we start with a strong base, if we start with something we like, we'll feel confident, we'll feel energized, and I think doing the rest of the painting will also feel a lot better. We'll be motivated to get the rest right if we like the beginning of it. So we're just going to put in a little bit of extra time. This is more of a softer orange than we have over here. This is going to be more of a saturated, intense yellow orange. So there is a bit of a variance between those two, and I would recommend incorporating that. It's also worth noting I painted over a lot of the branches. Not something I'm concerned about. I can just always go back in and resketch it. And if you're up over on Patreon, you can find the full sketch for this up there. I have the traceable, and I also have a real-time video. It's about half an hour where I sketch it all out and I show you how I do it. We talk about how we map it to a grid and transfer from reference photos. So if you're interested, check it out. There's a link in the description. You can also find the ad-free version of the video you're watching right now. So a bunch of stuff down there. But at this point, I like this. I think I want to redo this area, just make it a little bit more thick. So we grab our titanium white, our cad orange. Again, there was a hint of oxide black, but just so little. Work that down here, like so. And the more layers you do, typically the more professional your painting looks. It's a general rule with realism. We'll get there. We'll get there together. There we go. Okay, now more yellows, more titanium white. We'll just slowly make these changes together. Again, we want this area in the middle to be more saturated. Want it to be nice and thick. I'm taking the excess paint off over on the little cloth just to make sure that we're not over-committing. There we go. You could even throw a little bit towards the bottom here. See how that blends? And oh, that's beautiful. See, this is what I mean. You do a little bit more layers, and it can really, really pay off for you. Okay, now as we transition upwards, we do want it to be a little bit more gray. I think we go with a brighter gray than we did before, though. Maybe mix that into here. Yeah, that's perfect. And then maybe a little bit into our blue. Okay. All in all, I think this is a great start. Have a nice subtle sunset, which we can make a lot more lively when we add in the actual sun into the center. Now, when we look all the way up at the top here, we can see little clouds in the distance. They're fairly feathered. A lot of them aren't opaque at all. And I think this is the next step. So let's jump back into the painting and add these beautiful little wispy clouds in. Okay, so for this, we do want the larger flat-headed brush. We will mix it in with the lightest bluish gray that we had right through there, and we'll really brighten that up. I still want hints of that blue in our color, so we might even need to interject a hint more of the ultramarine, taking off the excess on the side as we do. But this is something where we don't want a pure titanium white. We still want it to be a little bit grayed. We still want it to be a little bit blued. I'm going to take a liner brush, make sure that's nice and damp. That way we can get a nice sharp marking. And as you can see, super tiny. Perfect for details in these little clouds. So we'll grab some of that. And what I noticed about these, the photo itself was taken in a way that's probably done with a wide angle lens, and that makes a little bit of a distortion, and it pulls the subjects on the edges a little bit inwards. So what's going to happen with these wispy clouds, they'll essentially be pointing towards the sun in the center. So over here, we'll be creating little wispy clouds that move outwards like that, and then they point in here. Then in the center, they'll point more so down. Over on the right-hand side, they'll point this way. So you see how we have a general concept, a general rule we can follow. It's also worth noting the blues up here are still a little bit wet, so I'm getting a wet into dry blend, which is great. My actual application style is that of applying this pigment into an area I want, and then I spread it out from the middle, but I try to keep the middle a little bit more opaque. That way it looks like the clouds have volume. By having the edges a bit more feathered, have that transition from the grayish blue pigment that we have, that brighter application, I think that right there is really, really nice. So we're just trying to create lots of different shapes and styles for our clouds. We want these to have good variance. It's also worth noting that as we get farther down, because this area is quite a bit brighter, we won't really see the clouds in that same way, and that's fine. We don't need to adjust the color. We don't need to make any real changes there. You are going to see subjects better against different backgrounds, and if you're always trying to change your subject so that you can see it against all backgrounds, you're going to create inconsistencies within that subject and that lighting. So we're actually keeping this really easy by just continuing to work with the same mix, the same color. We're getting depth via the gradients we're creating because, again, the central area is nice and opaque, and then the outskirts are much more transitioned. It's also worth noting that as your blue dries, your background, you might want to wet your brush more, because then you can do a wet into dry blend, and that just means that the pigment that we have is wet. It has a good amount of water in it. The canvas is dry, and we're going to create gradients not through actually mixing the new paint and the old paint together, but by optically creating a blend where, again, the center is very opaque and the edges are very transparent. So here's an example of that. It's just a very watery mix and kind of following that general scheme. As we get towards the bottom here, I'm going to make my clouds a bit more horizontal, and that's also intentional because, again, the way we see the clouds will warp depending upon how close we are to them. When they're close to us, they'll look like they're coming towards us. When they're far away, they end up becoming a bit more horizontal, and there's a transition between those two. So we're working on implementing that. This is pretty opaque and there's a lot of pigment here, so I'm going to try to really blend this out towards the sides. You want some clouds to be bigger, some to be smaller. Variance is really your best friend when creating realism in clouds. It's good to have patterns and general ideas of how to paint them, but at the end of the day, trying to break those patterns and create unique applications is so important. There we are. Very good. Beautiful. Okay, so we have a lot of clouds, all of which I very much like. I think I'm going to leave it for now because we don't want to overdo our clouds. We just want enough. You can see some are just little taps, others are elongated, but it's that variance between them that's going to get you the real results. So we like that. We're going to clean our brush right now. It might have a little bit of blue on it. The water might have a little bit of blue. If it does, you want to clean it really well because you don't want to interject blue into your yellows and make greens, especially in this area, and we're working on here next. So again, if you feel like your brush or your water are quite diluted by these hues, do so. If you feel like it's okay, right now I'm working with more of a gray in here. I feel comfortable kind of continuing with yellows, but just friendly reminder, clean your brushes and your water when you're jumping between dramatic blues and yellows. That said, we are grabbing yellow. We'll grab a hint of our cad orange. Typically I don't mix with this brush, but I don't want a lot of pigment, and this is going to help me be very mindful of the amounts I'm using. So we're going to mix up a very warm off-white. We're going to put that right where our sun will be. So probably right about here. We still know with fairly good certainty because we have the reflection right down there. You'll notice that this isn't as bright as this sun. We'll build out to that. And then I'm going to very softly blend the edges. Again, wet into dry blend because this is fully dry. My brush is just damp, so it's allowing me to get this more soft look. And it's creating this diffused glow, which is exactly what we want. Then we can bump up the brightness of the mix by adding more titanium white. And this is something that would be very effective if we fully let this dry. By not letting it fully dry, we're going to mix wet paint into wet paint. We're going to dilute that new bright pigment. So it's not going to be as bright as it is on the palette, but it'll still be pretty bright. And yeah, it'll be this subtle build and transition. So if you want that subtle build and transition, just keep applying that pigment, let it build up. If you want it to be a dramatic shift, then wait for it to dry and then jump back in. I am definitely going to wait for it to dry at a certain point, but right now, I like that we have the opportunity to create those subtleties. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just building it up a little bit more. We will incorporate the light rays as well. We're just not doing that quite yet. And now again, I'm just going to get some of the extra pigment off of the brush. Go in with more of a brush, almost no pigment on here at this point. It's just a bit wet for the sake of blending. And like that. I think that's a very good start. So still lots to do there, but I do want to let that dry before we do. I think for my next step, I'm probably going to wait for that to dry. I'm going to re-sketch in the branch that we have here, and then we'll continue working on the sun and all of that together. So good start, and I think it's going to look a lot better very soon. Okay, so again, I'm just going in and re-sketching all of what we have here in terms of the branches. I did change how I drew them, and we talked about that a little bit during the sketching video. But right now, we are looking at the contrast between the sun and everything around it. It is much brighter. It's also still not a pure titanium white, and that's the next step. I also think we start working on the water right down here. We build towards the foreground, and then we layer this on top of it. So we will grab that liner. We'll make sure it's nice and damp. I did clean my water just to make sure that things are nice and pristine in this space. We'll grab some of that titanium white with the liner, a little bit of that cad yellow, a little bit of that cad orange. Just make sure that it's a really nice warm white. That said, it's not that vibrant. The cadmiums are typically quite vibrant pigments, but we're working hard to dilute that with the titanium white to make this something that's quite a bit more bright and subdued. Often when you add a lot of light to something, you do take out that saturation. Real saturation oftentimes exists within the mid values and the dark values, not the particularly light ones. So when we're working with the sun and things of that nature, real lights, the saturation happens right around it, and the actual subject itself is very desaturated. Let's double down on the titanium white in the center yet again. We're going to do this many times throughout our painting process, trying to keep the sun relatively small, at least in these initial applications, because we will have opportunities to make it wider as we go. But the smaller it is initially just makes that judging of progression a lot easier. So I love that. It's also worth noting we did resketch in the branches. Just used my woodless colored pencils to do so because these typically don't bleed with the pigments and water, and we can allocate different colors to different subjects. But I like that as a start. Again, we'll go back to it many times throughout this, but for now, I think we are switching on over to the 1-inch flat-headed brush yet again. We'll make sure it too is nice and damp, and we'll start on the water. And when we look at the water, we can probably see that a lot of it is this blue underneath, and then on the top you have these orange, softer orange highlights. They're not too saturated. In the middle you get those really bright values, But we start with the base layers and then we build up. So we start with the mid values, the darker blues, and then we'll add the oranges on top. We're not going to try to do both at the same time because that could get a little messy, and it'll just be a lot easier to layer it with the bottom pigments and then build up to the highlights, which are technically on top in nature, right? If you think about a subject, the subject itself is the base, and then the light is being added on top. So that top layer is the brighter layer. Easy way to think about layering for subjects like water, grass, really anything. Light is almost always the final layer for that, and it's easy to build up to. So now we need a blue. I can see that the blue in here is actually pretty comparable to what we have at the top. I think this might be a little bit closer to a cerulean, but I want to keep it cohesive, so I'm still going to use the ultramarine blue. And with this, I probably want a slightly darker value down here than what I have up top. Often reflections in general are a little bit darker than that which they are reflecting. So we're going to look up here. We're going to look right here on our palette because that was our mix. We're going to say, okay, lovely that we still have this. And by the way, I love keeping pre-existing colors on my palette because I do find it helps me remix in a way that's much easier. So we'll try to keep this visible, but we'll remix a new blue right beside it, which is in large part ultramarine, titanium white, and oxide black. Now we do need a lot of this pigment, so you can see that I'm doing a fairly large mix, like so. Already I think this is beautiful, and it's a little bit darker than what we had for our previous mix, so you know we're on the right track. It's one of those things where we could make it slightly more saturated, but I think I like this for the distance. And then as you move closer to us and we get farther away from those orange hues, that's where we interject that additional saturation. It's also worth noting you typically get more of the innate color of subjects and their saturated versions as you get closer to you. With some sets, it can be a little bit the opposite because there is so much saturation in the distance, but with some subjects that general rule still does carry. So with that, we are going to take this, we're going to apply it towards the back. I'm just going to take the excess pigment off my brush. Doesn't really matter the orientation you do this in, as long as you, while it's still wet, switch to more of a horizontal movement. And you can see that my way of doing this is through a plethora of minute strokes. You could do this through one elongated stroke. My issue with that is when I do it, I tend to make the stroke bow a little bit. You get that curve, and I don't really want that. Rather keep it straight, and I find I can do that better through micro adjustments. But if you are somebody who does longer lines better through individual movements, please feel more than welcome to do exactly that. Personal preference situation. It's also worth noting, as we do this, that we want to make sure this is nice and thick. So you will see me go over past areas numerous times. There's not a dramatic variance in the actual pigment, so I'm not going to worry too much about creating a gradient right now. We're just going to try to get pigment on the canvas and a good amount of it. Again, covering up the branches that are along the side here. Beautiful, nice and easy. Yeah, you can tell this is a little bit darker than the top, maybe a little bit more than a little bit, but it's, I think, the right amount. Also go over the reflection in the middle. We can always go back and resketch that. Trying to take non-horizontal markings out through soft applications towards the bottom. There we go. By the way, again, thank you for being here. It's really exciting getting back to painting in the new space. I was looking forward to this. I think one of the first things I said when we just moved here was, I cannot wait to paint again. And that was, again, about a week ago. But very happy to be finally doing so. Again, things are not fully unpacked, but sometimes the easel, the canvas, just calls. And today is one of those days. So we're getting closer to the foreground. I'm going to make this a little bit darker, also a little bit more saturated. So I'm doubling down on the ultramarine blue in the mix. I'm doubling down on the oxide black, just like so. Give us some variance. Going to bring that over the foliage, which we will be incorporating, but again, we can just re-sketch that in. Have a lot of pigment here. It's a little bit more thin because there's a less titanium white in it. Titanium white is naturally a very thick pigment, wonderful for doing base layers if you only want to do one layer. But because we want this to be saturated and because we want this to be dark, we can't really add that titanium white in and have it still be the pigment we want. So at this point we're accepting that we're doing multiple layers, and that's okay. We're also going to start blending it into our pre-existing pigment. And if this is a little bit streaky, if you have lines of dark up here and then lines of light down here, that really isn't an issue. It's water, it's moving back and forth. I think as long as your markings are horizontal for the most part, it'll look good in the end. We're going to add a lot of very highlighted applications on top of it, and really isn't something to worry about. That said, you can see just how thin a lot of these applications are. You can see the pigment's almost ripping off a little bit. So I'm going to be careful with this, not to apply too much pressure, but I'm also accepting again that I'm just going to need to go and do a second layer once this fully dries, which isn't a bad thing. Gives us an opportunity to correct color if we want to, correct value if we want to. Often I try to make my mixes pretty thick because I'm confident with them that they are the right color. But this is also just a really good way of testing yourself as an artist, where you apply a pigment and then you let it dry and then you go back and you remix it, and that way you know that you know how to mix that pigment and you didn't just kind of get lucky and make it once. If you can do that, then you can ensure that you know how to mix your colors and your pigments, and then in the future, let's say you want to remix that color for another painting, you'll know how to do it. You'll have the understanding of the mixing process. And again, don't shy away from having to remix color. It will long term make you a lot stronger of an artist. So with that, I do need to let this dry. I'll go in and I'll do a second layer. I might make it a little bit more, just like a hint brighter, probably. But I'm very happy with how this is turning out so far, and hope you are too. There's a lot of great painting to come. Okay, so friendly reminder, the next step is the orange hues, which you can see in the water. In the background, it's a lot of little taps. In the midground, it's a tap with a slight drag, I suppose. We'll use a different brush for each of these. And then in the foreground, you can see how there are all of these zigzag lines, and then it actually starts to move pretty dramatically around the rocks, and this is where things get a little bit more interesting and diverse. But even this line of highlight right here, you can see how it moves up and down and up and down. This doesn't exist through here, and it certainly doesn't exist through here. So what we really want to keep in mind is that there isn't one way to paint water. It changes dramatically based off how close or far away you are from said water, and we're going to try to create a very smooth transition from all of these applications. So let's mix our pigment, and then let's start in the background. So let's continue by mixing up that orange. I do have clean water, as you can see, clean brushes, and the whole idea there is that we're not mixing it with the blues unintentionally, and again, making more of a green. So we'll grab a good amount of our titanium white, bit of our cad yellow, good amount of our cad orange. We'll mix up this nice subtle orange, which you do see in the background. Remember, it's not a hyper-saturated orange, it's more of something in the middle ground. You could even add in a hint of oxide black, and That does mean just the absolute smallest amount because it is a pretty powerful pigment. But we want to mix this. We want to keep it fairly wide on our palette because we are switching our brush over to a stiff bristled fan brush. Now I'm not going to wet this, I'm going to keep it nice and dry, and that way I can apply, as you can see, dozens of little markings all at the same time. We'll grab our pigment on both sides of this, and you don't want too much pigment because you don't want the bristles sticking together. Now we're going to go into that distance. I'm going to go right under the sun, and we're going to tap lots of these little shimmers in the distance. We can go all the way across in the background. You do want to make sure that your blues are fully dry before you go into doing this because you don't want these pigments mixing. You want this to go on top and stay pretty dramatic. It's one of those things where if it mixes, because this has yellow in it, it could look a little green. So we do want to make sure that the base is as dry as possible. It might mean taking a 10-20 minute break, but do so. It will make a big difference for the actual painting. It's also worth noting that we're going to go back in and do more markings towards the center than anywhere else because we are going to have more highlight in the center because of that sun than anywhere else. And then we'll build it out and we'll let it dissipate as we get towards the edges. But this area in particular does need to be well taken care of. We're also moving this out, as you can see, in little lines. And sometimes there are breaks in those lines. Here we have some, and then here we have some, and here we have some, and there's more blue in between a lot of that. There we go. Soon we'll switch our brush and our application, but this is a really good start for getting that background in. I also like the color a lot. You see that some of my lines are a little bit more diagonal. To be honest with you, that's not intentional, and I would recommend trying to keep them straight for the most part. Occasionally they will be a little bit diagonal just because it's unavoidable, especially if you're painting on an angle with a camera above you, but we're just trying to keep these pretty horizontal for the most part. And all in all, I think I really like this. I think it's a good start. We are going to do more of this. We're going to continue with this brush in later steps, but for now, our job is essentially complete with it. I might just do one more line. I always do that. I always say we're going to put down the brush, we'll finish the painting here, and then I paint more because painting is fun and sometimes it's just really hard to stop. There we go. Yeah, just adding a little bit more texture throughout, especially towards the top here. Beautiful. When we run out of pigment, we can do more subtle taps here and there in areas where we don't want a lot of pigment, but could use just a hint of it for the sake of being cohesive with the rest of the painting. So far so good. At this point, while we do want to keep this brush for the most part dry, we don't want the pigment too dry on it. So I am going to put this in the water over here, and when we want to use it next time as a stiff bristled brush, we will just dry it fully and then we'll proceed. But with that, we are going to switch back to this guy, and we are going to mix up a bit more of this pigment. We want to keep an abundance of it. I don't actually want the cad red there. Be careful to take that off. And then we will switch yet again over to my liner brush, which is right here. There we go. Make sure that's nice and damp. We'll grab some of this pigment. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look where the sun is, and then right under it, we're going to start creating some horizontal markings because we're going to have that stream of light in the center. And we want this to be pretty opaque. It's going to move a lot of the dotted markings that we did before together to a singular stream of light. and it'll be a good start. You could even do a line straight down like this for the sake of getting it straight, and then you can move it into those horizontal markings afterwards. Now, because we are spreading the pigment pretty dramatically, you will notice that this isn't as opaque as it is over there. It's not as bright. It's because we're starting to see a little bit of blue underneath it, which could look a little bit green if we have too much yellow in it. So do remember, try to be mindful with the amount of yellow you are using. That said, we can build up the layers and make it look great regardless. So nothing to actually worry about. And then we're going to start in this midsection, transitioning our applications to being these small horizontal markings. So we talked about how the water changes aesthetically pretty dramatically based off how far it is away from us. And now that we're getting towards this middle ground, we transition into these lines, and I'm trying to add these lines back into some of the taps that we did before. That way it feels cohesive, there's a transitionary point, and we'll do that again down towards the bottom, where while there are different application styles, they coexist in the transitionary area. So we're doing both of them in some spots, and that'll just make everything feel nice and smooth. This will take a little while because we are making a lot of lines, but that's okay. We're all here because we love painting, and this is just an excuse to spend more time painting. I love getting back to this. I was thinking about getting a big new easel for the space. Though I found with these videos, with these paintings, I'm actually really enjoying standing up and having this on a table. I think as long as your back can handle it, it's a pretty enjoyable experience. I think I paint faster this way than when I'm sitting or using an easel. Just easier to assess the perspective and all of that. I also find sometimes I can paint with real pressure and then the easel kind of bends back and does all of that. So this has been really nice while working on the videos because it takes away some of that extra thought, and it just lets me focus on the art and talking to all of you, which is why we're really here, right? So at this point, it's getting there. It's still far away from like what we actually want it to be, but it's getting there, and I'm starting to see some of the potential, which is great. I'm going to double down on some of the applications I really like, because when our brush is watery, and our brush is watery, our applications are semi-transparent, and we need to build those up over multiple layers. So we need to let it dry, and then we go back in, and then we add more pigment, and this is the process. This is what we're doing. It's working well. It's working very well. And now that we get a little bit closer to us, we can start making these markings a bit bigger, a bit longer. We still want the little ones in between because it's the variance that's going to keep it interesting, but you can see that this line right here is a lot bigger than the lines that we have above it. We're still also moving predominantly in horizontal lines. They're not really combining much or getting too diagonal. That will happen, it's just not happening yet. And again, we want that natural transition. It's also worth noting, typically I get a little lazy, admittedly, towards the edges. I don't go back for new pigment, I just let it run out. I use whatever I have left. Do try to give that an equal amount of attention. That's what I'm doing now. I'm going back, I'm fixing up some of the markings which might be a little too semi-transparent. We'll build these back up, and we'll just make sure that all of the painting is getting the love it deserves. Though I might keep the edges a little bit darker as a whole, which means slightly less applications, because I want it to vignette. I want the eye to be drawn in towards the center of the painting. I want that to be the brightest area. The eye does naturally go to the brightest point, the point that has the most contrast, and again, we want that to be right there. So, being mindful of that, I'm also going to make sure that the middle portion has a lot of thick pigment, because we're continuing this down here through the process of these taps. And then it starts to approach this rock to be, and when it gets here, I'll show you on the reference photo, it starts to warp around the rock. It starts to bend around it. So now this is where it gets really interesting, in that we have movement in the water and that it's not just horizontal. So it's a bit of a transition from horizontal here, and now there's a bit of a bend. Like so. Ooh, I already love that. Oh, that's fun. Again, it's a little bigger, so we get closer as it wraps. It's one of those processes you can just spend hours on if you want to. You can paint it quicker. You don't have to do the double layers. I will through some of it. For the sake of making this a digestible video for you though, I'm going to be mindful, so don't worry too much. There we go. Okay, it's also something to note. Sometimes I will take a step back here, and that's just so I can get a better perspective of this as a whole. I talk about it in every lesson, but when you look at a painting for the first time, you're probably walking into a room, you're probably 10, 15 feet away. You're not 1 foot away. So it's important that it looks good from and afar, and typically when you take that look from a distance, you can see more imperfections, more things you need to change. Typically when you're close, you're focusing on details, but you're not looking at it as a larger harmonious piece. And again, taking that back, you get a better idea of what you really need to do with it. So there we are. Okay, really like how this is turning out. We are going to avoid doing too much of the highlight behind the rock. As you can see, it's more shadow. The water itself is casting that shadow. And there's just more shadow in the foreground because we're getting farther and farther away from the light. So different things to consider. That said, I do want to double down on these markings right through here, make sure that they're thick. And then when we get up close, it's more of those zigzag patterns that we saw before. And if you make your mix really watery, like this, you get these very semi-transparent markings, and they can be great for implying those highlights, but making them darker so that it feels right in this space. So again, here, it's technically the same color, but my brush is very wet, so this is a lot darker than what we have there. And they're zigzags, and they're moving around here. We want to transition into them, so brighter into darker, and then you can barely see it on the edge, which is nice because it gives us that vignette effect. Again, more water in the mix. Now the first application will be pretty bright, so I'm going to use it towards the center, just reapply the areas that we know we love with it. And then once we start to run out of pigment, that is when we can start moving this out into the negative space. Behind the rock, now that we have almost no dramatic value in it. It's a subtle highlight, it's soft. Beautiful. It's coming along lovely. as always, if you have any suggestions for future paintings, let me know in the comments. Always curious to hear what you're interested in. What's the passion? I was just looking at different floral pieces this morning, which is something I haven't really done on the channel, but again, we started picking up a couple plants for the home, and I feel like I'm getting excited about that idea. So, yeah, different things that you likely see here pretty soon. Still have a lot of landscapes in the to-do folder, without a doubt, but always just trying to expand and learn and do the best we can. One of those things where we'll always have a favorite subject to paint, but we'll also probably want to explore a little bit. Keep learning. Adding slight highlights to some of these, just portions of them. I'm not going over the entirety of the line. More so typically I'm just going over the top of the line. So the top of the line is the most bright, it's the most opaque. The bottom of the line is a little bit more semi-transparent, it's a little bit darker, and that way it looks like light is wrapping around the wave. It's catching at the top, and then it's being subdued towards the base. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I love that. Okay. This is really fun. Again, fresh pigment. Start an area you know is going to be bright. Double down on those applications, make them nice and strong. And then once you're mostly out of pigment, we can head back down into these sections. Also introducing little taps here and there in the lines, just to show little pops of water that'll catch more light, and creating that diversity of size of application will make the larger applications here look even bigger and more realistic. So we're always just trying to build that diversity throughout the painting process. Now we have rocks down here, and they're going to create some water ripples around them. So it's this really interesting funneling space where we have markings there, and then it kind of just runs through the center. There we go. Again, unique, fun. We can definitely do a lot to build this out, but as for a first application, I'm very, very happy with what this looks like. We can also take some of that very watery mix and start to create some longer horizontal highlights in the distance, looking at areas that already existed thanks to the fan brush, and just connecting them to a greater degree with this semi-transparent, softer mix and application. Yeah. We can also, we don't always have to have it come out from the middle. Sometimes it can kind of be from the side. Just trying to make this a little bit more interesting and show that there are areas that are going to stand up, that are going to catch more light, and this is a great start. Oh, accidentally put it in some blue there. Going to be very careful. Make sure that this next mix is quite yellow. There we are. Just love painting. One of those things where it looks a little awkward at the start, and just keep doing it until it becomes that which you want it to be. Okay, still, again, a lot to do, but I think the next step is simply taking our large flat-headed brush, making an even brighter orangey yellow mix, building that up, like so. Taking our liner, applying this in the center. Already an impact with that, and it can be brighter. We're doing this in baby steps. Applying this true highlight predominantly towards the center. We don't want everything to adopt it, but we do want this line to be well adorned and light. Hints of the sides as well, trying to create that gradient from the darker edges to the brighter centers. There we are. And we just keep going until we get what we really want. Okay. Kind of funny that you have a camera here. I realized I smile a lot while I paint. I don't know if that looks silly, but just really enjoy it. It's good. There we go. Okay, again, a lot yet to be done, but so far, very good. A little more white. Continue to work that in the middle, continue to build it up. We still want it to have some color in it. Very good. Okay, now I think I should probably check the batteries on both of these cameras, just because we have been painting for a little while, but just keep doing what you're doing. We are moving in the right direction, and very soon we'll have some very nice water. I'm also thinking about doing a little glaze over it. And you know what? I think I want a little bit more blue, actually. Blue, oxide black, titanium white. We're remixing the blue that we used for the base. And this is something you do if you feel like you've added too much light in any one area. I don't need a lot of this pigment, so you can see that I'm mixing it just with the liner brush. But I think I want to keep this line a bit more dramatic and stand out from the rest. So I'm going to just create some separation between it and the rest of our markings. Definitely here. This is a great way of reinterjecting detail later into the painting process. It also means you have an opportunity to remix pigments you've already mixed before, which will of course make you a stronger painter, and that's always great. I just looked into the camera and realized it's getting a little darker in here. I should probably turn on some lights, and again we'll continue this together. Okay, so from here we're going to get a bit closer for a little bit, and I'm going to go in and tap on additional little highlights, just like so. And here you can see it's a little bit more orange. We just worked a bit more of that cad orange into here. And the idea is creating a little bit of a diversity in our highlight color. And I'm trying to apply these a bit farther away from the center, trying to make that center area almost more of a warmer off-white, and then we move into the oranges as we get towards the edges. And doing all of these additional little taps is going to be great for creating the scale in waves, creating extra detail. Really, the more of these we do, I think the better the painting will look in the end. And if we do too many in any one area, then we can just go back and re-interject the blues that we had too. So it's really a very low risk. All we're risking is spending a little bit more time doing the painting, and I think we all really just enjoy doing the painting, so that's no risk at all. With that, I'm just continuing to build out some of these more semi-transparent applications. Might make that a little bit bigger. Head back on over here. Cumulatively, it'll make a real difference. As you do it, you might question, am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? Is it looking better? And that will probably be the mindset and the thought until you've done a lot of them. And then you'll take a step back and you realize, oh no, that did do a lot of good. So just keep at it, and we will get there. And we'll get there together. It's been a really fun painting so far, and the real catharsis of it is still yet to come. Really trying to expand upon this area towards the foreground. I think that it is starting to feel a bit more complete. Again, I don't want it to be as bright as these areas, but I do still want it to have those highlights to a point and feel good. Just like that. Okay. Those are good movements. You can see how I'm starting to connect some of them in the foreground. When we looked at the reference photo in the very beginning of the painting, we saw a lot of zigzags in the foreground water, and I am trying to deliver on that idea. So here now we're connecting these two. That kind of connects over there. This was an easy area because we could see how things are just wrapping around this rock and this rock. Pretty neat. I'm also missing this area because that's just going to be more of the wood a little bit later on, and that's okay. We don't need to do much with that now. Now we'll just go into the back and create more of that tapped transition into the fan brush markings. And I think this is genuinely an area that could use quite a bit more work. So we'll just put that time in, make it the best we can. I think admittedly those markings might be a little big, but that's okay because we can always go back in and reincorporate more of the blue. I also think when we step a little bit farther back, this is going to look a lot better. So again, paintings aren't seen from 1 foot away. They are seen from rooms away, typically. Also, if you're wondering, I did turn off the face cam because it is now the night, and when I was trying to set up the tripod for it, I felt like I kept creating a shadow on the painting with the tripod, and I couldn't figure out how to create an orientation that allowed me to not have a hard shadow on the canvas. Here you can see a hard shadow from my finger, and I tried to just prioritize giving you the best shot of the actual art. So in the daylight, we'll put the face cam back on, but again, I would love to hear if that's something that you enjoyed in this, if you liked how I did it. Is it worth the extra effort in the edit and the setup? Let me know. This is looking good. Really trying to create dramatic amounts of detail. We're almost there. I think we add a bit more light right through here because it is following underneath that. You can see that it's a bit less bright than that though. There we go. Okay. So from here, I think we probably take a step back. We give it a little look. I'm thinking about doing a glaze or two in the background, just to make things feel a little bit warmer. And then we can play with it in larger, more dramatic ways than just all of these taps. Let's do that. Let's take that step back. I think it's looking good. And at this point, everything is fully dry. I'm not going to recommend doing this step if you're very happy with your water, but if you want the water to have some extra warmth or cool tones, then this next step is potentially useful for you. We're going to do a bit of a wash, a bit of a glaze on top of portions of this with a warmer hue. So I'll just grab some of my cadmium orange, a little bit of our titanium white, cad yellow. We don't want too much actual pigment because we're going to thin this pretty dramatically, and the less pigment we have, the easier that is. But we do want this to be an orange base, so more orange than yellow, because when it thins over the blue, as you know, we will get a green. But if it's an orange, then we won't, and it'll be great. So here I'm really just trying to get my brush as depigmented as I can. We'll thin this out to the point where it's like watercolor. There you go. You can see just how transparent that is. And then we're going to, with the flat-headed brush, start applying some warmth. Predominantly for me, it's in the back, towards the sun. And then I'll just have it progressively lessen as we move forward in the painting, like so. Beautiful. Can't forget about the sides. And you can even go over the center, because realistically, we did want to go back in and reinstigate those highlights anyway. So, easy way of adding a lot of warm values to your painting. I'm going to try to make mine change as subtly as possible. Here you can see as I go back, I'm kind of ripping paint up because I'm really pressing into the canvas. And I think it's all about just finding that right amount for you. Just do a little bit up towards the top. You can see just how unifying the technique can be. And now it goes from that nice orange to the blue. We can also do this with blue at the bottom. And you can even use water to kind of rip off areas of this. So then you have lines of that warmth here and there. While the pigment's all still wet, it's very malleable and you can do a lot with it. Very much up to you. Whether you want those lines, whether you want it to be just a smooth gradient, or again, this is a technique you actually don't have to do. It's just there if you would like to change that which you have a little bit, or a lot. Very quick, easy way of going about it. There we are. Now, of course, in this process, we did make the midsection a lot warmer, and I do want to work that back into something a bit brighter and a bit more akin to the sun. So, a lot of titanium white. Work that into the center here. So it's a warm titanium white. Again, back to the middle. Because all of this pigment is now wet, applying this will be a lot easier. Maybe like painting wet into wet. Grabbing more paint. There we go. Doesn't that look so much better? Okay. Now, let's take more of it, interject it in the middle of these sections, rebuild out that variance, because when we do add in that warmer wash, we do unify a lot of the variance that we had. And we want some of it to be unified, and we want some of that variance to remain prominent. So now we can go back and we can reassess those areas and represent those highlights and the ones that we feel the most deserving and suitable. Just like so. Have a real warm glow to it. Again, so much fun to build on. Okay. So at this point, I think the pigment is all pretty wet, so it's difficult to continue to build these highlights on this space. So you probably want to take a break from essentially this technique. I'm just going to do a little bit more in this line, and then together we'll move on to the next step, probably taking a break from the water. Though this, again, is always something we can go back to. Though I really like where we are for the most part. If I do anything, I'll make a little bit of a blue mix. No, I said we were going to move on from the water, and then I had another idea. So we'll move on from the water soon. We're going to mix a blue similar to what we used for the base layer, more towards the top area. So lots of gray, a little bit of blue, a bit more titanium white. This will also be a glaze, so we don't want it to be a lot of paint, a lot of pigment. We want it to be more so watery. and therefore we're not grabbing a lot of paint. We're trying to keep it relatively thin. And we're just going to try working in some horizontal markings up here to show variance in the warms and the cools that we may have lost with the glaze. You don't have to do too much of this. You don't have to do this at all. But I want to show you all of the different techniques we can do. So when you're working on yours and you're making your own versions and your own creative decisions, which for the record, always feel welcome to do, we are all welcome to get creative with it. But I think I love this. I think this worked really well for me. I like the extra lines. I like the separation. I like the back and forth of the coolers and the warms. I'm trying to be careful not to overdo it, but I do like it. There we are. Maybe a little bit of finger painting even. The classic. Maybe make it slightly darker for the edges. Not too dark. It's definitely an in-between. Yeah, just like that. Okay. Again, good start. Let's go back to the liner briefly. Interject a little bit more detail into the larger negative spaces we just created. And because it's all wet, this pigment will go on so smoothly. The back and forth is really where the magic is found. We do a little bit with one pigment, we do a little bit with the other pigment, until we are just very, very happy with our painting and the full end results. I think it looks vast. I think the types of movements in the water look diverse. I think there's a good change from one to the next. We could also spend hours more really perfecting this and doing quite a bit more detail work. I think for the sake of this lesson, I'm not taking too much of your time. This is probably where we take a break from it, but again, I do like that. The next step is going to be a big one. So we purposefully incorporated the water before this so that we could paint this on top of the water, but now we have our water mostly completed, we can work here. Now for the reference photo, this has a darker, warm base layer, and then it has cooler highlights on the bark. So for the base layer, we are going to go with our cadmium red, which will be a lot of fun. We'll go with our oxide black, quite a lot of it. Hint of our white, hint of our ultramarine. That way it's nice and cohesive. Still a cooler red, but we do want it to be this almost darker red pigment. And we're just going to cover a whole lot of the canvas, which will be quite fun. I typically, when I approach the painting, like to begin with an edge, so along there, and then once I start to run out of pigment, once I no longer have that much control with the brush, then I'll move in the rest of the painting. So we have fresh pigment. I'll start by creating some intentional clean lines, like so. And then once it becomes difficult, then we'll just take the remainder of the pigment and we'll fill in some negative space. And that's a pretty good routine to get in. Trying to move around here so we can get some sharp markings. There we go. I don't think you can hear it, but fun background information. We did, as you know, just move, and one of our neighbors, we think, sings opera, and we can hear them typically around 8, 9 o'clock, and they're really, really talented. So every time it happens, get kind of excited. It's, oh, you listen to somebody who's really perfected their craft, and it's pretty neat. It's not loud where we are. You can barely hear it, but still it's a real showcase of talent, and it's been a lot of fun. In a weird way, we moved because of the construction noise at our last place. But even when there was construction noise, there was definitely a part of that where it was just really neat watching people make something, put something together. I've always loved construction sites just because I like watching things being built. And there's definitely, even when it's difficult to maneuver around the audio, it's really inspiring to see people make things and do well at their craft. So always a lot of reverence and respect there. Feeling similarly about the opera. And the opera is also wonderful because I don't think you can hear it on the camera, so it won't impact work at all. I say work. We're painting a lovely sunset together. Doesn't feel much like work. That's the beauty of making art for a job. Will say, do get asked a question a lot. If you are somebody who's working on these and you ask, do I mind if you sell them, your works based off of my acrylic lessons? I do not mind. I do not mind that at all. I actually encourage it. I love the idea that you are going out and turning your hobby and your passion into something that can make some extra income. I think that's wonderful. So don't worry about that. Just make sure that the reference photos that I use are completely royalty free. Typically I'll link them in the video description. And yeah. Always want you to feel like you can do what you want with your paintings based off of these acrylic lessons. Now we're going to get a little bit closer because we do have these little branches to work on, and I'm going to use the liner brush to do just that. Now with these, I'm trying to make the branches as small as I possibly can, and then I expand them later if I feel they need expansion. But the tip here is to apply as little pressure as possible. And I try not to make a lot of elongated markings. I try to turn them into a lot of smaller, minute applications because it'll give it more of a stick effect, where if you do an elongated marking, it might look too artificially smooth. So we are actively trying to make plenty of taps and drags, but it's the real combination that does it. Also, do try to work with a really small, sharp brush. Try to add some water to it. That way it condenses your bristles. You want something that does render just a great amount of detail. See that? Nice and tiny. It's worth noting that if you are new to the channel, you aren't aware, I do have a brush set, which you can find in the video description. It's the same brush set that I use for all of the lessons that I've used for the last 2, maybe 3 years now, probably 3. And this is the same set I've been working with from the beginning. But I try to use the same set for all of the videos. That way, if you pick this set up, and you can follow all of my lessons and you don't ever have to worry about, oh, do I have this brush? Is this brush the same size? Is it the same stiffness? You just know you have exactly the right brushes for the job. So if you like to follow a lot of these lessons, or you're really starting to enjoy the channel, and you just want to take the guessing out of it, that brush set is available in the description. I don't think there are many left in stock, but there should still be a few. There we go. This is a lot of fun to paint. I think it's giving the rest of the piece a lot of life and character it needed, especially this big guy. It's aesthetically a little strange without all the textures and details, but those are soon to come. Trying to do lots of crossing of different branches, making sure that these are all well cared for. Adding little bits to pre-existing bits. Oh, okay, again, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a little bit of singing in the background and it's fun. Wow. That's talent. Okay. Another benefit of where we moved, we're pretty close to a lot of the art galleries here in Toronto. The AGO, all of the wonderful little galleries that are just adjacent to it on the street across. Wonderful space for art. Great park to draw and paint in. Maybe we do some plein air paintings this summer in the park. Paint from nature in real time. That could be a lot of fun. Tricky to paint plein air. One of those things where people are walking by and you're looking at your painting at questionable points and you wonder, are they judging me? The painting will look good. I know it will. I just need a little more time, you know? And then we get there. Okay, I like that a lot. I think we're almost done with this application. If this area isn't nice and thick, I would recommend going back in and doing another layer, but you can also take your liner and add little intricacies in the bark on the edges with it. And I would recommend you cleaning up your edges if you feel they aren't as sharp as they could be. So here I'm just going in and adding little bits of, you could say, character. There's definitely more in my painting than there is in the reference photo. It's a bit more smooth in the reference photo, but I think that it's adding a lot of really solid dimension. And again, I would recommend doing a little bit in yours too. Maybe we have this break off in another branch like that. Maybe another one. Lots of little guys. And leading lines bringing us inwards. That's pretty neat. That is definitely pretty neat. Now we'll zoom out for a second, and while we continue to let this dry, what we might as well do is work on our rocks right down here, because we're going to render them with a very similar dark base layer. So we are just jumping into this, giving it also the time and attention it deserves. And you can see that I'm starting with the edges, but now I am going to have a hard time continuing. My brush isn't as damp. I need more water, I need more pigment. So we are just going to work the negative space with the brush. X-shaped patterns typically do the best for really moving paint around. I think a lot of artists work left to right, up and down, but it's the X that really gets you where you want to be. And then we come down there, very good. Again, apologies if I'm ever putting my hand in front of the canvas, still getting a little bit used to this style of filming, but trying to be mindful. Definitely doing my best. There we go. Making real progress. Already coming together. There's another rock right out here. Like so. And we're almost covered the entirety of the canvas, just like that. Pretty fun. I feel like that's always a good milestone in the painting process. Here we are. Still so much painting to be done, but it's looking good. Now while this starts to really dry, I'll just head back here, give it a good second layer. Definitely thin areas. That's okay. I find the Amsterdam paints I'm working with now are a little bit more thin than the Winsor & Newton acrylics that I used to work with. And I still really like the Winsor & Newton acrylics. Also a big fan now of these. I think that they're both really good brands. I like the colors of the Amsterdam a lot. So whichever you have access to, I think I would say go for it, but recognize that the Amsterdam is probably a little bit more thin, and you're going to likely have to do slightly more layers here and there. Again, good reason, good excuse to just keep painting, adjust your colors. Really not a bad thing. I think we'll also take some of this, and I might incorporate a couple more little rocks that I don't see in the reference photo, but could just aid the painting. We don't need to do too many. We could also use these to cover up portions of water that we don't love. So that's another fun little trick, technique to all of it. Oh, I like that one a lot. Don't want to do too many though. Okay, you know what? I'm telling myself I'm stopping there for now. If we need more later, we can go in and add more later, but I'm quite happy with that. I think we'll spend the next 5 or so minutes just applying a second layer onto all of this, letting that dry. So I'm going to do so off camera, just so things aren't too repetitive for you. But the next steps are very easy ones. It's just doing more of the same, doubling down on some of the branches we know we really like. And a lot of these are lifting, as you can see. Fun. Very fun. A lot of personality in these. Now, something I just realized we didn't do yet. We're going to take a little bit of our orange, same orange we've used for the rest of this. We're going to apply it right underneath all of our rocks, the trees right here where the branches meet the water. And this is going to make it look like that water is wrapping its way around these subjects, and they'll just feel a lot more incorporated into the space. It's an important thing that I forgot until just now. But I think that looks a lot better, and we can make it look even better. Let me zoom you out and we'll continue to do that. Okay, so again, we're just looking for the bottoms of our rocks. Here's one. And we're running just a little bit of that behind there. Then we're going to add some extra titanium white into our mix. And then I'm just going to place this on the sides that are closer to the light. So it's just a little bit of a sparkle to hints of it. We're not going over all of it, but it'll make it look like the water's rushing up. It's catching some extra light, and it's just really, really pretty. It's a little thing, but as you can see, it's making a difference. And I'm not going all the way. I'm not going all the way back with any of this. I'm just doing it in the area that will receive the most light. And if it's a little bit too bright, I do a little finger painting. You can rip it off to a point, but I do think a little bit goes a long way, and I really, really like that. Something else we can do, which I found I liked, was we grab a little bit of our cad orange, hint of our titanium white, mostly a cad orange mix, and I'll actually apply this right around some of those almost white markings we have, and it'll give it a bit more of a glow. It's a really quick, easy technique. So the middle of the marking is almost white, and then the outside is a bit orange. And I'll just give it warmth in a way that we may lose when we really bump up those values and make it almost a white. So again, just little things we can do to make it better. We can throw a bit of that warmth into the surrounding areas, just as a wash almost, and it dissipates as it moves from the center. But I really like that. I think we're in a good place. We are going to continue working on this big guy right here, and I think we want to do so with a bit more of that orange. So we'll grab our orange, we'll grab our white. This doesn't have to be a perfectly clean mix because we're putting it over a darker base. And as you can see, when we zoom in, there's a lot of almost blue bark, which we are going to paint, but there's also these beautiful highlights where some of the bark is catching that light. And that's what we're going to do right now. Just little spaces that protrude, catch light, and have a pretty big impact. So we're just going to try to mirror this motion. Lots of little taps, drags. We can actually probably incorporate it under most of this, at least a little bit. But sometimes it kind of works its way up into the rest. And then we have these very easy bonus details, which are pretty good for the painting. See that? Just like that, we have some level of texture and dimension. It's not a lot, it's not meant to be a lot, but through these minute additions here and there, we'll build something real. You know? I think we'll build this up a bit more. A couple more little taps just to show that there are little portions of almost granulated wood that protrude and also catch light. That's a similar technique to what we'll actually do down here amongst our rocks, because we are going to have these highlights work their way onto a lot of these edges, and you can see that these oranges are not as bright as the oranges in the water, so it doesn't conflict, but it does create a good hue and diversity. Love that. Really love that. It comes along so quickly too. Adds a lot of warmth to the painting. You can see I'm leaving lots of little openings. And the idea is this is a fairly rough rock. Lots of indents and divots. We can go back up here and reestablish some of these. Now that we have more highlight down here, we can see just how much room we have to add highlight up here without it feeling unbalanced or unnatural. Maybe we add a hint towards the top once in a while. Just wrapping around small portions. It's amazing how easy it is to add dimension through just the smallest of markings. I think we'll add a bit towards the top of this and then the edge that's facing the light. Little textures, details. This one too. If your highlights on the rock start to blend in with the water a little bit, that's also fine. These are subjects which can coexist and visually meld a little bit. In nature, that happens all the time. You kind of lose track of one subject in another. And when we make art, I think a lot of people, I'm just following the reference photo here. And when we make art, a lot of people just try to differentiate all of the subjects, make them vastly different. And your paintings will look a lot more realistic if you, here and there, just let subjects meld rather than standing out and all being these contrast-heavy entities. There we go. That's a nice top of the rock through there. Didn't really intend to do all of this with the rocks right now, but I feel like we had an opportunity and it's just fun. I really like this highlight. We have a lot of it on the palette, so why not? Why not? I say why not. Partner and I, we were listening to classic Disney Channel songs last night, and one of them was Hilary Duff's Why Not? True classic. Fun one. I'm talking about that, what felt like the innocence of media in the early 2000s and just how airy, light, carefree it felt. And revisiting it kind of just brings you back there and makes you, just lets you turn down a little bit, which is nice. There we go. What's a piece of media, a song, a book, a film, a comfort show that you appreciate when you just want to relax? I'm sure most of us enjoy painting as a conduit to that, but in terms of media and nostalgia, what's something that really still resonates with you as a comfortable space? Can just turn a day where your mind is busy and stressed into a really just nostalgic, reminiscent, happy experience. I feel like it's important to know what does that for us. That way we can work with it on the days when we need it, you know? We were going through a lot with this move. Moved pretty earlier than we intended. And it meant just kind of putting a lot of things in motion, really hoping different things worked. And we got really lucky time after time, and the stars kind of aligned in this wonderful way. But it definitely meant a lot of just hoping and, remaining calm. I feel like music's always a great conduit for that. Here we're building some of these little vertical markings to show that there's real volume in these rocks as well. Getting really excited about adding the greenery in here. I think that's going to have a big impact. But essentially, almost every time there's an end to one of these lines, I try to do a little horizontal or vertical line down. See that? It just creates this movement that implies a lot of height. There we are. Also creates leading lines which push the eye upwards, which we like. Then we can go back over our favorite areas with a second round of highlights. Build that up, just be a bit more prominent. Just trusting the process. Then as we start to run out of pigment, I'll just do little taps and whatnot in the negative space. And then we have these darker little patterns, bonus texture. It's a really easy way of continuing to build the realism without doing much work. Like so. Okay, let's do a little more titanium white, a little bit more cad yellow in the mix. Just like so. Take that. Head back to the areas that are going to catch a lot of light. We'll apply that in specifically those. We're not covering up everything again. We're not going over all of our past applications. We're just going into the areas that look like they will get the most sheen. And we are rebuilding on these. Beautiful. Isn't that just warm and lovely? Very, very happy. Hope you are too. Hope you're enjoying. Hope you're feeling good. Hope you're in a good headspace. There we are. Oh, I think this has so much potential. And we're really getting there. Good. Maybe we incorporate a little bit of that highlight into the wood. Okay, so once this is reasonably completed, we are going to put the brush down. That is me verbally noting that I'm going to put the brush down. I'm doing that so that I actually do it rather than just keep painting, but now I want to add highlights to the ends of these branches and, you know, maybe I don't put the brush down just yet. So hard once you start, you know? It's just too much fun. Because we could just go up here and we could say, you know what, there should be a little bit of a highlight underneath the bigger parts of the branches. It doesn't have to be all of them, just the little ones. The big ones. The big parts of the little ones. There you go. Yeah, I think that added some good dimension. Okay, now, actually this time, we are going to, I was going to say put the brush down, but then I added more highlights, so. Oh, it didn't get me there that time either. Just wanted to keep painting. There, okay. If we just add a little bit more titanium white, then surely I will be at the place where I'm happy to move on to the next step. It's one of those things where I really like it, and I think we could move on to the next step. I think it is good enough. I actually really love it, but that's the thing, I really love it, and I want to do more. I feel like it has so much potential. Just little bits of these highlights throughout. That's probably a little too much right there, but yeah. Okay, you know what? That looks fantastic. We are going to actually, this time, put the brush down and move on to the next step. Okay, so now, as you can see, we have a lot of bark going through here. Bluish details, really nice textures. That is our next step, and we can even throw a little bit of it down into our rocks as well. So the next mix will be a versatile one. Then we can work on some fun things like adding the shine in the sun, some of the greenery up here, right down here. So let's jump into that and continue this beautiful little painting. Now we begin as we typically do with the larger flat-headed brush. We will grab an abundance of our ultramarine blue. We'll make it into a darker grayish blue. So Mars or Oxide black, titanium white, and this right here actually looks pretty good. I think we just make it slightly more blue and we probably have what we want. As for the application, I'm going to switch to a different brush, that being the smaller flat-headed brush. This one's great for rendering blocky areas, but with more detail and intentionality than the larger one. We will make this a bit damp. We will grab some of this pigment, and then we'll start creating these larger areas of bark, which we want to be a little bit rough around the edges, so I'm doing this with a lot of little taps and such. Upon applying this, I feel like it is a little bit too saturated, so we'll add in some extra titanium white, oxide black, then we'll just paint over that one once it dries. But for now, I think we go in with this new mix. We'll apply it right beside, that way we can see the variance, and that's a lot better. It's still nice and cool, but it's not too dramatic. We'll create a separation between a number of these pieces. We want all of the pieces to be pretty organic, some bigger, some smaller. And you can see again, there's little lines in between each. There we go. Have that along the top. Trying to bridge a couple of them so that they don't look like they're always one right after the next. If we can diversify the patterns and the shapes a little bit more, it gets a lot more interesting. There we go. Now as we move down here, I think it will get a little bit darker. We're getting farther away from us. We're getting less and less detail at this point. So I think I'm going to change the mix before I get down here. And because of that, I'm going to use the remainder of my current mix while it still has a place up here. Still useful, we're just putting it somewhere else. And we don't want to neglect the tops of these. So we're just going to make sure that's well attended to. We'll apply this up here. Okay. I like that a lot. Fits together kind of like puzzle pieces, kind of like a cobblestone road. We can connect further once we have some of them put together. And I want them to be larger the closer we are here because that's closer to us. So we'll keep that in mind as we build this out. I think this area as a whole is almost all this brighter pigment, which makes sense. It's a little bit more wrapping towards the visible area of light, so we'll just bring that in. Then we'll go over this one. Might need to do that one more time, but that's okay. This will be a multi-step process as a whole. There we go. Now when we get to this side, we want to darken it. I'll probably do that with a larger flat-headed brush, just because it's better for mixing. You can get so much more surface area and pigment moved with it. So now, yeah, just like that. See how it gets darker? So we can still instill the same application style and shape, movement, but it gets much, much more subtle towards the bottom. We can incorporate some of this into the ones that are a little bit in between. Create those transition areas. If they're still wet, it'll blend really nicely. If it's not, that's okay. You can do more of a wet into dry application. But I think that right there was already a really strong start. We can also take this pigment and run it towards the bottoms of a lot of these markings. That way it looks like they are protruding. It has a little bit of depth. There's an area that's lower. It has shadow. Again, easy ways of just doing a lot for your painting. And we can even do it on the tops of some as well if we feel like they might be descending into the crevices that we have in between. Like so. And we can do some little openings in here, just textural pieces. That in itself is interesting. I like that. We do need to let it dry a little bit before we deliver additional textures and whatnot. However, we can take our liner brush, we can take this pigment, and we can add some additional textures, details, dots into our rocks. And this will visually create a good connection between this and this. Behind the rocks, you will have these cooler shadows. And it'll add, again, just more color complexity in general. And that's very valuable in these more silhouetted spaces. There we go. See, very subtle. Not doing much of it, but it does have an impact. Doesn't need to be a big impact, just an impact. Finding different places to place all these nice hues. We can also use this to break up highlights if we feel like we've ever done too much in any area. And I will try to utilize it for exactly that here. Like that. Okay, actually very lovely. Now, This looks like it's done a fairly good job of starting to dry. So, you know what, actually as I move around, I can see a little bit of a glare. So I am going to let that finish drying. And in the meantime, I think we do something really fun, which is work on the greenery for the first time. For that, we do want a couple more branches down here. So we'll take the liner, we'll take the darker bluish pigment that we have, and I'll reinstigate some little branches. Again, the liner is perfect for this because you can get such tiny little markings. But we want greenery up here, we want greenery down here, and the reason why we're putting it in those two spots is one, because it's in the reference photo there and it's calling for it. But there is a lot of intentionality behind it as well, in that this area is in the left-hand side of the painting, this is in the right-hand side of the painting. So immediately we're bridging the left and the right-hand side of the painting with this color. Additionally, this is on the top of the canvas, this is on the bottom, so we're bridging the top and the bottom of the canvas too. So as far as a balancing perspective goes, we're accomplishing a lot by having just a little bit of greenery right down here. So we'll do a good job with this. You can see I'm really expanding upon these. They're leading lines for the most part. They're pointing in here. If we want, we can do maybe one more little area of greenery. I think I want it actually in here, in this darker area. And that way we have 1, 2, 3 spots of greenery. Typically with subjects you want an odd number of them, that way the eye moves around a lot more, it's more dynamic, and I think that'll actually do the trick quite well. Now let's mix some greens. For the first time, we do have a sap green on our palette. I'm using a Winsor & Newton variant of that, and we're going to make a pretty bright yellowish green. So we'll grab some yellow, we'll grab some green, we'll grab some titanium white. That's beautiful. Let's grab more yellow. Make it nice and fresh. Hint of our Oxide black because we don't want it to be too saturated. And then, you know what, maybe a hint of our orange too. It's a warm sunset. These warm hues from the sunset will work their way into even the greens. And oh yeah, that was definitely the right call. I love that. Okay. It's not as bright, it's not as vibrant, but it fits the scene better. And then we can come up here and we can start tapping these onto the ends of the branches. And also just about over these spots. Oh, that's lovely. Okay. Okay, very, very happy here. Far from done. I feel like I've been saying that forever. It's just one of those paintings where we picked one with a lot of detail, a lot of highlights, a lot of layers, and that's been quite enjoyable to play with today. Again, I've been looking forward to painting for a long time. So to finally do it and for it to come out as well as it currently is just such a pleasure. We are applying these greens in here despite the fact that they barely show up. That is going to happen again. You are going to have values that match fairly well, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. If anything, I think it creates a lot of realism. So don't shy away from that. Okay, and I think I also want to make this a pretty green area. Lots of leaves down there. We want some of these to overlap our our branches. That looks good. I love the little ones. All of these delicate little petals and leaves just add so much volume and form. They also add scale in a way that is difficult to show otherwise, because they're so tiny they make everything else look big. Should really see them right through here because we have such a dark backdrop. When we start to run out of pigment, we'll work in this area, but while we have a good amount on our brush, and we can get these larger, clean, sharp movements, I want to get it here. So a little bit of green, a little bit of green. I probably don't have too much left, so yeah, now is a good time to interject it down here. And these are just fairly randomized taps. There we go. Head back up to the top, do a bit more. Love that. Wow. Okay. I think that looks really good. Let's edit the pigment just a little bit. Make it slightly darker. A little more green. Hint more orange. We won't see only a singular shade of green, we'll see multiple. And this will stand out quite nicely in these areas where it's a bit brighter, where the other leaves kind of got lost. So between the multiple values, we can accomplish a lot. Have some real standout pigments. Build some more opaque applications through this too. If I have a cluster of leaves, I'm trying to put this behind that cluster because it will make it look more dense. The darker the leaves you have, typically it means the more dense, the less light is working through that area. So this is a really useful pigment if you've done a lot of taps in close proximity with the lighter mix. Also, again, quite useful in these areas down here because it's already quite a bit brighter. Contrast is nice. You can see I'm slowly building the amount of these we have. Started with a small amount, and then I jump around and I'm playful, and we don't overcommit early, but we are open to really building it out. There we go. Try to do some along the edge of the tree itself, because in theory there are some behind this area as well. Ooh, okay, that looks good. Now, yet again, let's go darker. Oxide black, cad orange, sap green, a little bit more oxide black, a little more sap green, hint of titanium white to thicken it and desaturate. And that's a nice new earthy tone. Kind of bridges the oranges and the greens in a really nice way. This is another one where if you have a cluster of foliage, it's a good color to put towards the middle because it'll create a lot of depth for you. Don't want to do too much of it because it is pretty strong, but it definitely has its areas and applications. There we are. You can also kind of use it as branches if you want to, because it is a bit darker and a bit more brown. So if you just want to add detail or more of these little guys, it's also a great option for that too. Here you can see we're just doing lots of little bonus branches. Start with a safe amount and just build until you're happy. At this point, I am quite happy with that. So now I think we go back to working on some texture for this right here. I'm going to take the larger flat-headed brush. We'll just take our excess pigments off on there. We are going back to a dark bluish, almost black mix. So lots of Oxide black, ultramarine, hint of titanium white. We're going back to the darker hue that we had there. We are switching for the first time in a while to our fan brush, grabbing that, and we'll just tap in some darker textures into these. I think it's evident I actually need to go even darker. There we go. That should do it. Also, try not to get too much paint on your fan brush or it can condense your bristles a little bit. We're not really trying to do that. We're trying to keep things pretty broken up. And here we're just trying to create lots of little openings and notches and breaks within the bark. So keeping the larger shape, but adding this textured detail into most of it. Starting with a minimal amount, and then we build as we work our way through, and already you can see just how much of a dramatic effect those taps had. Just make sure you're using a stiff bristled fan brush, because if you're using a soft bristled or a medium bristled one, your bristles will condense and you won't get these tight markings. So that's great. That's all we need that for at the moment. Now we're switching back to the larger flat-headed brush because we are mixing up a brighter variant of that. Titanium white, ultramarine. Switching back to, let's go with the liner. Let's do some detail work with the liner. Now we can go and add some bonus details and textures with this in the areas you feel might have more highlight. And we're just building up. Building up, building up, building up. Ooh, very happy. Very, very happy. It's turning out so much better than I expected. Had a vision for it, but I feel like a lot of things are just going really right. Making fun discoveries as we go. Big fan. It's a pretty interesting piece too. It's pretty unique. I've done hundreds of landscapes on the channel, but I don't think I've done anything that looks, I'd say, even similar to this. So if you're watching along and you haven't started and you're looking for a pretty different one, I think this is the answer. Okay, let's go slightly brighter yet again. A little more blue. Slightly brighter. You can see I'm just going back and forth. Not making too many dramatic moves, but just going to interject a little bit more light in some of these shadows. Bring them up to the point where they have more volume, because the more variance in highlights you add, the more volume your bark will have. Don't want to do too much, but I think this is actually a really strong amount. Okay, very good, very good. Now I think we do some taps up here. And taps are important. We've done a lot of drags, but it's the taps that add the real detail. So try for a real combination of the two. Okay. Now at this point, I think I'll just do a hint more of the darker little pieces of foliage. We'll let this dry, because we do still want to go back in and add the sun rays, but we need it to be completely dry, otherwise we might accidentally rip up pigment in a way that we don't want to. So we are going to take a little break once we have these additional pieces of foliage in here. It's so hard to stop this painting. I'm really enjoying myself. Okay, you know what? I think we can take a little break. We'll come back in and we'll make it even better. Okay, so we're back. It's the morning. We have a bit of a brighter look at it, which I actually really appreciate. Great when you're finishing things up, doing touch-ups. That said, the next step is going to be adding the light coming from the sun right here. Now, I'm going to begin with the 1-inch flat-headed brush. We'll make sure that's nice and damp. Wipe off the excess. Then we'll grab a little bit of our cadmium yellow, a little bit of our cadmium orange, and of course, our titanium white. Mix up a good orange heavy warmer mixture. Maybe we double down on that cad orange. We don't want it to be too saturated, because nothing in this area is that saturated. But I think this will be a great start. We'll put that down, pick up our liner brush, and jump back into this. Always very happy to start painting in the mornings. I feel like you just have so much time to go for it and make the best piece you can. That said, I am starting right here. I'm going to make the line a bit wider towards the sun itself, and then it'll taper and get smaller towards the top. Then we're going to start making these come out in different directions. We know that we want one completely horizontal, so I'm actually going to start there next, just because it's an easier plot to point. Like so. And this isn't going to be all of our applications for this. We're really going to build it out, what brighter areas, darker areas, all of that. Orange kind of gets lost at the bottom, which is nice. Now we'll grab a bit more. We'll start working in some diagonal lines. I think I actually want, rather than one going out like this, I think I want two. So we'll leave a little bit of space. You can have these either the same length as the last two or a little bit shorter. think I'm going to start with shorter just for the sake of trying and seeing what the more diverse option looks like. You can always do trial and error while you actually paint. Remember to make the area closest to the light a little bit wider. And I know we won't be able to see all of this just yet. And that's okay. We're putting oranges on top of oranges. But we are going to be adding whites to the center and really building out those highlights. Something else you can do is you can just do a little finger painting, extend it, soften the edges. You don't have to, but we can. And I'll go back and double down on some of these, especially towards the base. That's where you want it to be the most thick. And then it kind of dissipates as you get out towards the edges. Already a strong start. It's one of those things where we painted for hours and hours yesterday and didn't want to stop, but you know, better to get our sleep and approach this fresh. And to be honest, I already feel like I'm a better painter. I don't know that I could have made these straight lines in the way that we are right now last night after painting for all the hours that we did. One of those things where you just do need a refresher here and there. So very happy with this as a whole. So the curse of being a painter, you just want to paint and paint and paint. Even if you've just painted and painted and painted. I'm just making this a little bit more prominent. And now I think we'll switch to our next mix, which will be more yellow heavy. So interjecting more of that cad yellow, interjecting more of that titanium white, because we are still trying to keep this relatively desaturated. But I think that's a great next step. Now this will go on easier if the pigments underneath are fully dry. I don't know that mine are, but we're going to give it a try. And I'm going to apply it predominantly in the center and towards the bottom of our previous mix. We can also add this yellow around most of the sun. Give it a bit more of a glow. Fun effect. Go back over some of our previous areas, and you will find occasionally that you apply too much yellow and it overtakes the orange. You can always go back and just work the orange on the sides of the yellow again. So don't feel like it's the end of the world if you have to. I'll probably do so a little bit. That's okay. Okay, already starting to look better. I like that. Now, I want to continue brightening the center of this. However, we have a lot of thick, wet paint here, and if I continue to try to add it, we'll probably just rip it off in a way that we don't want to. So, I think we take a little bit of break from brightening all of that, and I do think we go back to the orange briefly. Have to remix a bit more of that. I'll just do so up here. Again, lots of titanium white in the mix. And we just mix until we get the right color. That looks like it. So we're going to be extremely delicate and careful. I don't want to make these too wide, but I do want to re-interject that color complexity. Orange can definitely be more prominent towards the ends. There we go. Definitely getting there. Now we'll go back to the yellow for the areas that got a little too orange. And it really is a back and forth. I said, I think from here we let it dry and then we come back in and we continue playing. Okay, so just remembered we have this little guy now, so I thought I'd hook that up. But with that, this has had time to dry. We are going to go in now with a brighter, more yellow and titanium white heavy mix. If you look here, I'm actually doing it with the liner. Typically, again, we don't mix with this brush, but I don't need that much paint, so it's okay here. With that, we will grab that pigment. We're going to go to the center, and we're just going to work this up. Working very hard to keep the oranges on the sides still visible. And once you get this to be actually opaque, it looks so much better. It takes a while because we are working with a lot of water on our brush. That does thin our pigment, but we do get there eventually. And when we do it, it makes a big difference. So already really like the effects of this application right here. If you feel like your brush gets a little too watery, to just wipe it off. There you can see that it is, and you can tell by the fact that there's that little water droplet on the canvas rather than pigment. So we'll just interject more paint onto the brush, and that's really the easy fix. You just add more actual paint, and then it ends up stopping the water from being so overwhelming. It's just about creating a better mix of the two. A lot of patience for this subject because, again, we are working with a lot of delicate applications. We do need to let things dry. We're working with a lot of water. Again, I'm very happy I'm doing this the next day. I think it's just turning out a lot better because of it. I'm not going to do these very elongated strokes towards the bottom because I don't see them in the reference photo, and I also feel like I want this to be a little more self-contained, a little bit more subtle. So I actually really like that amount. I think that's quite pretty. We can take a little bit of these added highlights and we can throw them onto just portions of our rock down here that we want to be a little bit more stand out. Remember, the more values we add in these settings, typically, the better they end up looking, the more complex. We don't want to do too much of these, but little bits here and there do add up. And I also think I'll take a little bit of the orange mix and work that into the water as well in areas that we could improve. So this is the stage of the painting where we're going back, we're making little changes here and there, and I feel like we're quite close, but there are still little things to do. So I am going to take the larger flat-headed brush. Yet again, we are going to mix up maybe a little bit more of the blue that we had in the background. We'll grab this, we'll work it up here. Yeah, you can still see that, that's good. Lots of titanium white, a little bit of oxide black. And the more you mix, the quicker you'll get at refining colors. Right now I'm trying to refine the pigments that we used for the base of the blue water because I want to do a little touch-ups with that. I'm just trying to keep this fairly clean on my palette. Easily maneuverable. We'll give it a little test with the liner. The liner is what we want to apply it with. And for me, I just want to clean up this backing area a little bit. Typically, right before you see all of the light on the horizon, you do see a slight line of blue. So it's kind of interesting. You have the light at the back, so you expect the back to be the brightest, but there's just this little sliver of grayish blue, which does matter, doesn't have an impact. So I'm just trying to reinstigate that. It's a little bit wider towards the edges, so here it's a little bit less thin than it is here, but it's still a pretty thin line. Yeah. There we go. Okay, honestly, that made a really big difference. We can also tap in little bits of this blue. I'm not sure if you could hear there, but my knee just cracked a little bit. That's how you can tell time is occurring. The knees get a little bit louder. It's my birthday, I guess in 4 days. That happened quick. But I think when I was younger, I loved birthdays because I loved celebrating and just getting everybody together, and it was fun. And then I think towards my late 20s, I started to not love birthdays so much. I was like, oh, I'm going to be 30 soon. I don't know how I feel about that. And then I hit 30, and it was actually the best. I loved it. It was one of those things of now in life, I feel like I'm at this little reset, right? We're at the start of a decade. It's exciting. I was very happy with life in 20s. So, surely life in the 30s will be even better. And so far, happy to report that it is. But it's just interesting how we feel about time and birthdays changes over the years. One thing, again, that changes is the fact that the knees, for no good reason, just like to make sounds, little cracks and such. But that's okay. Working to take good care of them. Should probably do a leg day in the next 2 or 3 days. That's also something I found. Knees really hurt when I don't go to the gym and train my legs, but I feel like when I'm very consistent with it, my knees hurt a lot less. I think that's just building up the muscles around them. That way there's less pressure on the joint. The muscles can handle load better, in theory. So, yeah, just different things that we think about as we get a little bit older. But again, birthday very soon, going to be 32, I believe. I feel like at this point I'm not really keeping track. But yeah, 30 was great, 31 was great, and I'd like to think 32 will be pretty lovely as well. There we go. Adding lots of little blue swerves back here because we still want that motion, but again, we want this area to be a little bit darker as a whole. So this is our way of continuing the techniques that we were doing up here, honoring those ideas, but also doing so in a way that feels natural with the rest of the setting. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Very happy thus far. Okay. I like that. I like that a lot. We'll do some little blue taps down here. This is just going to add a hint of extra life into these areas. They're kind of highlighted by the sun, but not quite. Just to make it feel much more dynamic. We don't want too much of it, but here and there will do some good. Okay, like that, like that. That's really pretty. Yeah, that's what we were looking for. And these are all predominantly just vertical lines, nothing horizontal. All the horizontal ones are in the warmer oranges and yellows. So I really love that. I really love the line now. I think we could add more branches up top, however. So we will just yet again go for a brand new mix. And I think for the branches, we'll go with the Oxide black, the blue, a little bit of white. We'll keep them cool for the most part. You know what? I say that. I want to add a little bit of orange. I think the ultramarine and the orange make for a great branch color. It's a little bit more brown. It's a little bit more earthy. Oh yeah, that's lovely. It's very subtle, but it's lovely. Now we can go back and fix these up. Again, fairly damp brush. Very little pressure when you do this, because if you apply a lot of pressure, your bristles expand. You get a larger surface area and application. We don't want that for here. So we'll just go back in and make this nice and pretty. We'll say we are nearing the end of the lesson. And I do want to say a big thank you to you for being here, for sticking around, for painting with me, or just relaxing. And if some of you, and I'm always curious what the percentage of the amount of people who watch these for the sake of just sitting down and almost listening to a little bit of painting ASMR, versus those of you who are following along and completing the painting. So, you know, if you are still watching at this point, I would love to see in the comments just which side of the fence you're on there. Are we painting? Are we watching for the relaxation elements? Neither of which is right or wrong. I'm just curious. I feel like I watch a lot of painting videos, but I don't do the paintings in the videos. I'm just watching more so to sometimes pick up on technique, sometimes just enjoy the process of watching something come together. It's kind of like what I was talking about earlier with construction, where there's this strange part of me that actually loves construction sites and the sound of it, because I just feel like it's people making things, and I think that's inspiring. And it gets me inspired to do what I do. So you never know what makes us happy and motivates us, right? That said, and this is a solid transition here. Listen to this. If you are new here and you are looking for something to continuously inspire you, you should check out the Patreon up there. I do have the drawing video for the traceable of this. You can get the traceable of it. You can watch these ad-free. Up there I also have these big bonus lessons, a lot of them on big 24 by 24 inch canvases, and those are typically 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 part series. So if you like working on big canvases, there's a lot of option up there. Up there you can also get my ebooks, which include acrylics for beginners, which are essentially the essentials. Everything you need to know about acrylic painting before you jump into your first. There are ebooks full of traceables as well. There's a lot up there. There's a link to it in the description. And also, this channel is predominantly community funded. That is the community that funds the channel. So if you would like to support the channel, if you really like these videos, if you'd like them to continue, if you'd like to see them evolve and get better, the best way to do that, the best way to support and say thank you, is up over on Patreon. I greatly appreciate all of you who do sign up, and I know a lot of you who are watching this right now have signed up, because I do post these directly to Patreon as well. Thank you. big thank you. You have no idea the impact you have on my life and my ability to make these, and I won't ever be able to say thank you enough. Because of you, we made this. We made this today. Couldn't have done that without you. And I thank you for it. There we go. I'm just expanding little branches. And very happily so. Oh, think that he might be turning on. That would be nice. It's still quite early. It's pre-coffee in the morning right now. So I am kind of just going for it, but I am really excited for a little bit of warmth, a little bit of sun, a little bit of coffee. That sounds really good. I don't know about you, but I find that when I wake up in the morning, if I just start painting or making something, then I'm in a very productive space for the rest of the day and I can kind of just keep going. But if I wake up and I go on my phone for an hour or I do something else, I feel like I have a hard time getting in the groove. So this morning I knew I really wanted to get this done and I was really excited to do so. So got up immediately just to the canvas, got a fresh little dish of water and started making it happen. I like that a lot. Yeah. That said, we can also do little taps in our bark here. Just separate areas, clean them up if we want. There will be little divots and such in this space. Oh, there's the knee again. Oh, it's telling me you're about to be 32, Ryan. You're so close. It's not wrong. Just one of them though. So that's a blessing, I suppose. I'll take it. And again, maybe we need to do a leg day tomorrow. I think today we're training back. And that's fun. Oh, I love this technique. Yeah, okay, we should do a little more of this. That's lovely. Also, I wanted to do a new tier on Patreon. I'd say a month and a half ago, I think I talked about it, where I want to make a tier where each month I post 6, 7, 8 of these paintings, and then you could claim whichever one you would like, and it would be the first person to claim it would get it, and then I would send it to you. Probably it would definitely be the more expensive. I'd make a new tier for it, because it would be like buying a painting, I suppose, but on Patreon. I haven't figured out the logistics of it, but that is something that is coming up, and if you wanted, this is a painting that I could include. I had the idea and I was really excited about it, but then with moving, I didn't want to ship anything out because that just seemed like not the right time to do that. But I am going to start that, I think, in May. Definitely in May. So that'll be fun. Loving the texture we're adding. I think the more texture you can add in this, the more variance of values, the better it is going to look. Some of these applications are very watery, some of them are very opaque, and the idea is just creating a lot of variance. Yeah, even down here, that's really good. Okay, you know what? Let's mix a little bit of our blue and our black. And let's add just a bit of texture down into here, similar to what we did in there. Because it's a little bit silhouetted right now, and I think it could be a little bit more unique, a bit more diverse. Just create a range of these darker values to splash in texture. Make it slightly more interesting. And honestly, I think that's all it took. That made a big difference. Okay, this is exciting. We're doing really well. We can splash these back here. Again, little taps and such. We can go in with the darker pigment and reopen up spaces, taper areas. what a fun painting. This is one where I know I'm not going to be able to put down the brush. I will just keep painting for hours and hours. And for the sake of finishing it to upload the video for you, I think this is where we actually call it. So I will say this was an absolute pleasure. It was the first painting in the brand new home. It was the last painting I will do at 31 years old. And I think it can always be a special one. So I hope you enjoyed the different composition and aesthetic of this. I think it was pretty striking when I saw the reference photo. I thought that's a really special, unique one. So I hope you enjoyed. If you're painting along, I hope yours went lovely. If you are just watching for the sake of relaxation, thank you for being here. I hope you relaxed. I hope you feel inspired, and I hope you feel good. We are going to do a lot more of these paintings now, especially that we're in the new space. With the last one, I felt like I was constantly having to stop for different construction sounds, which is something we don't have to do anymore. And I think it's creating a lot more positive loops in the painting experience. I think I can paint longer. I think I can paint just in a really good headspace, and that's important. So I'm really excited about continuing to make these. I am starting a brand new series on Patreon that's going to be multi-part. It's on, I think, an 11 by 16 inch canvas. I do have to check. It might be 12. But we're going to take an old style of painting and we're going to make it in our version. It'll be pretty neat. But again, if you are new here, there are a bunch of really big lessons up over on Patreon. There's over 100 bonus lessons up there too. So check that out if you are interested. Check that out if you are interested. How Canadian. Yeah, I kind of don't want to turn off the camera. I kind of just want to keep painting, but I know I need to upload this for you, so I'm going to, and I'll just make another video after that. With that, again, thank you for being here. I will see you next week with a brand new painting lesson. I think I'll see you on Wednesday on Patreon with a new sketching video, but with that, I will see you soon. So thank you, and as always, above all, stay creative.